Okay, I am now going to be going over the history of Pardis. If you are confused about any of the kingdoms or what we're even talking about or some things about the world, you can go back and watch my last video, which set up the kingdoms and talked a bit about the unique features of the world. This is going to be a bit longer of a video, but if you are going to be playing in this world or you care about it, I think it's worth watching. If you have never heard of it before and you wish to play in a campaign, it'll be really nice to know because a lot of these will be referenced. A lot of moments in this will be referenced. If you are just somebody who already played and is just curious, also worth watching to tell me if stuff happened the way that you interpreted it. But I will apologize in advance if I stutter over some stuff, and I may eventually in the future do a much clearer, better edited version of this with maybe some more accurate photographs and maps and stuff. With all my disclaimers out of the way, at the end of this video, I will have a quick version. I may actually make it a separate version, which will just be the bare minimum that you need to know, because this one will have all the juicy bits and the fun bits so that when big stuff does happen, you know exactly why it's happening in the world. And without further ado, here we go. We're going to cover... So a quick reminder that this was a year-long campaign where players played as kingdoms, and we played out all of this stuff. So anything you're about to hear, whether it's a conflict between two kingdoms, that was actually messages back and forth between two real-life people actually talking about what they want to do with their kingdoms and talking about the conflict at hand. It all started when a tunneler handed out a religious and magical tablet. He unintentionally started a new era. This new era will be marked as ATR, after Tunneler's revelation. He said one important thing as he gave them out. He claimed that no kingdom should ever colonize the world volcano where he lived. It should forever remain neutral ground. In the year 77 ATR, Donartha marched a military into the world volcano and took occupation of it, killing the tunneler's remaining family and imprisoning all of the other kingdom's dignitaries that were stationed here. I would like to take this time to let you know that if something I'm talking about is relating to a kingdom at hand, I will always try to put their kingdom's image in the top right or top left of the frame so that you can kind of put a mental image to the events rather than just memorizing the names of these kingdoms. Okay, after Donartha took this in 77, they learned that the volcano was actually brewing the heart of the last living god, Loom. He is the god of the all-hell. Donartha promised to keep this a secret and nurse Loom back to life, which meant death to every other kingdom once the heart matured back to life. This is something that Donartha was well aware of. Not knowing the extent to which Donartha just doomed all of the other 7 kingdoms, each kingdom spoke out against Donartha's actions as breaking the rules set forth by the tunneler. Hajim personally vowed they will be deploying a military to the volcano to remove Donartha. Donartha then named the volcano An-Tus, which is still named today. As a counter to this, all 7 of the remaining kingdoms created an alliance called the UKR. I believe that is... Oh, my apologies. Okay. It's a weird image, but we're going to keep going. As a counter to this, all 7 of the kingdoms created an alliance called the UKR, which is the United Kingdoms of the Realm, to deal with the threat of Donartha. It was decided that Hajim would supply the military, Axelphage would supply the weaponry, Hearth and Amenhotep would allow easy access through their cities so that Hajim could move swiftly. In year 81 ATR, Hajim's forces reached An-Tus and the Battle of Burning Waters takes place. Donartha had created Loom's minions in the form of fire elementals called Forgeborn, and Hajim had created self-suiciding units called Einthar that would activate a magically surged charge stone called Zyre and explode it for a fierce impact. Dinartha won this battle and fended off the Halaju invaders by weaponizing the lava of the volcano against the Halaju forces. Dinartha remained in control of the volcano, and the secrets of Loon's resurrection was kept safe. Hajim promised to come back and take it at some point. For the following hundreds of years, relatively kept to themselves and grew in the ways they found important to them. During this time, Vorlong's flame of creation began to dwindle. They looked to Lalatula for magical help, for ways to rekindle this. Hajim licked their wounds and found good allies in their continental neighbors, Amenhotep. Hearth began to be the first to give Dinartha again, not knowing about Loom, a chance. The Goldscale dynasty began to take Axophage's production prowess in exchange for defense against the ever-growing threat of the barbarians. The barbarians were a small settlement that felt slighted because they were left out of the Tunnelers' revelation, and their lack of sigilling and protection from swell storms made them crazed for revenge against the kingdoms. When all was peaceful, in year 2019, Hajim revealed a useful, powerful governmental structure they have created, which was slavery. They would enslave the taller races, seeing them as inferior, and they found it apt justice for the hundreds of years before the Tunnelers' revelations, where they themselves were persecuted. Until this moment, bartering for goods and services was mostly a tool in the most widely used tool in the realm. Hajim discovered that the useful power of forced labor could work as a fortune to have control. Okay, we're back. Yeah, sorry, this is going to be the unedited version because I don't have a lot of time to sit and edit a 45-minute video. But essentially, Hajim's, sometimes the script will fail me, but Hajim's slave labor essentially broke open their economy in a way that many other people didn't expect. And once it was seen by everyone, certain people jumped on board very quickly. The first of which was Amenhotep, who jumped on board. Okay, we're back and rolling. The kinks will get figured out here. Amenhotep's slaves were claimed to be willing clerical initiates devoted to the gods. Vorlong's slaves were to keep the kingdoms from any further civil wars. And all of their economies got a giant bump as those kingdoms began to excel. The remaining kingdoms began to push back against slavery. Hearth and Hajim particularly went to head several times, with many thinking war was going to break out. Dinartha spoke up against the lambasted Hajim for slavery, which reignited talks about Dinartha's continued control over Ontus, the volcano. The topic of slavery broke up the UKR as Vorlong, Lalatula, and Hearth left the alliance, stating its ineffectiveness to A. stop Dinartha from controlling Ontus, and B. come to simple conclusion that slavery was evil. Around the year 300, the CFF, known as the Confederation for Freedom, was founded with Hearth, the Goldscale dynasty, Axophage, and Dinartha, showing that the realms were ready to move on from the stealing of Ontus and move towards the problem of slavery. Again, Dinartha was the only kingdom that knew that by inheriting their volcano, they were going to revive Loom and kill everyone. In the year 325 ATR, Goldscale Dynasty colonized the world wonder of Timoni and traded the land to Hearth, starting a long, prosperous trade between the two kingdoms, who were on different continents. This trade showed that alliances can be beneficial if operated properly. In 334, Axophage killed several barbarian outposts around them using their elite Wolfpack military units. And then they ran south and helped the Goldscale dynasty with their barbarian issue, killing another settlement. This put a large target on Axophage's back. In 338, an island with the shrine of the dragon of luck and wonder, Setsi Zing, that was a god, was colonized by Hajim, furthering Hajim's culture into letting fortune guide the way. They made Setsi Zing their core religion. In addition, a powerful magical user by the name of Sahid rose to prominence with their mission to one day abolish slavery in Hajim. In 346, the Gold Scale Dynasty was lifted the first dragon egg, which was made to produce many more, later with the use of giant incubators. Also in 346, Vorlong aids Lulatula in their military escapades, eradicating barbarians from their continent known as Kabarafu. In return, Lulatula tells Vorlong about their espionage powers and offers to place spies in anywhere in the world for them. Vorlong asks for spies on the volcano, and Lulatula obliges. Vorlong begins to grow their military and plans to take the volcano to give life to their dying flame of creation. They also created phoenixes that will be used for their military. In 350, it is revealed that Lulatula has colonized an island made of swells and has created schools of magic that will now be the epicenter of studying the arcane in Pardis. So this next part is really important to understand. Though not an active war anymore, Hajim and Dinartha had many ongoing battles since Dinartha took over. Hajim has the entire time promised they will return, to which Dinartha welcomes the challenge. Dinartha decided to take matters into their own hands and march south to destroy Hajim before they can ride north. This is the important part. I lack a map currently, but to get to Hajim, Dinartha must first ride through Hearth and Amenhotep. Dinartha asks permission to use Hearth roads and land for travel. Hearth agrees, seeing Hajim's use of slavery to be abhorrent. Dinartha then asked Amenhotep, not knowing that Amenhotep and Hajim had been allying themselves for some time. And in 408 ATR, Amenhotep told Dinartha he would allow it, but in reality he informed Hajim of Dinartha's march and offered to use his city as an ambush point. Hajim did just that, and as Dinartha came through presumably safe, but got hit by the ambush of Kolth, Amenhotep's city, and lost the battle resoundingly. Hajim and Amenhotep had teamed up to deal Dinartha a huge blow. A constant war has now been started between Dinartha against Hajim and Amenhotep. Dinartha seeks help from their closest ally Hearth, who refuses, now citing that their warmongering got them what they deserved. This war will last over 100 years and be called the First War for Antus. In 451, barbarians attack Axelphage, hard for what they did to them years prior, winning a big battle and pushing all Axelines into their capital. The barbarians were threatening to topple the entire kingdom until the Gold Scale Dynasty rolled their army up north and helped defend against the barbarians. However, the barbarians fought with a new type of magic that allowed them to disappear and reappear all over the battlefield. This was named Jaunting. In 455, a powerful traveler named Daku, the Supreme Lich King, arrives in the kingdoms. He claims he will secretly enter one kingdom and present himself to the government of that kingdom. If they keep him safe, he promises to grant that kingdom powers that no other kingdom can imagine. However, if kept alive, he claims he will cull 5,000 living people from 2 other kingdoms and turn them into undead, bringing them back to his land far off. Daku chose to stay in Axelphage, and Axelphage planned and promised to keep the Lich King a secret. However, a Dinian military general that was stationed there since the barbarian attacks witnessed Daku and reported it back to the dynasty. The Gold Scale Dynasty said they would keep their secret as long as they were compensated if they were culled. Due to Hearth's public loyalty to their democracy, a Hearthian reported overhearing the news about the Lich King in the Gold Scale Dynasty. Now that 3 of the 4 kingdoms in the new CFF, Axelphage, knew about the Lich King, Axelphage decided to tell Dinartha, who agreed to keep the secret, despite knowing this could mean 5,000 of their own people would be killed. We will be back to this conflict later, but the Lich King waited and observed the kingdoms from inside Axelphage until otherwise stated, and Hearth, Denartha, GSD all kept this secret, knowing the Lich King would eventually cull thousands of people, which could include their own people. In 471, Axelphage colonized an island that had smoke rising from it. Hajim thought it was in their territory and immediately warred and killed the colonizers, taking the land for themselves. 4 years later, in 475 ATR, 2 dragons rose from those sands and now belonged to Hajim. One of them was bred for battle, named Alib al-Mat. It was gifted to the youngest Kulim in Hajim's history. This same year, Denartha aided the Goldscale dynasty in the barbarian attacks. This defeat to the barbarians led them to hold a meeting of all the chieftain heads to formulate a plan. This was the first time this type of meeting had ever taken place amongst barbarians, and they decided to meet and colonize on land of their own. They grouped up in the now named Chieftain Isles and made a city named Winterglaive, and named themselves the Scourge, claiming they would be pronounced the Ninth Kingdom, even making their own banner. In 488, seeing the uptick in ambassadors being traded amongst kingdoms, the CFF, seeing the uptick of ambassadors being traded amongst the CFF, Vorlong, who had been growing their military larger and larger, proposed a counter-alliance. It consisted of all the other kingdoms, Vorlong, Hajim, Amenhotep, and Lalatula. It was named the UAS, United Alliance of the South. They strongly believed that the land that Ontus, the volcano, needed to be taken back from Denartha and remain uncolonized. They began to plan to take it back. The CFF was constructed to be an equal input and output alliance, earning all help that was needed to be paid for. The UAS decided their alliance would be a help those in need no matter what example, expecting nothing in return. Smaller battles continued to break out between Hajim, largely backed by the UAS and Denartha, namely the Battle of Trap Mine, which continued to trade hands and act as the main battleground for the war. It was Denartha's main supply for weaponry. In 488, in order to help the war efforts, Lalatula for the first time began experimenting with magic in relation to its use for war. It backfired, and there was a magical explosion killing many and frightening the public. But the wizards learned valuable lessons about how to use magic and began to test the limits of magic in secret. In the year 500, churches crumbled to the ground all over Pardis. In the dirt it read, "Loom will rise." A report then came out by an anonymous source stating the following things. 1. Axelphage is hiding the Lich King and the entire CFF knows about it. 2. There is a god of the All-Hell named Loom. He is currently being nursed by Denartha at the volcano of Ontus. Denartha plans to resurrect this evil god and allow it to feast on every person in all of Pardis, as was their intent after colonizing the place all those hundreds of years ago. And immediately, King's Court was held, where the CFF admitted to holding the Lich King, and Denartha admitted to attempting to resurrect Loom long ago. Complete chaos and faction wars were on the brink of breaking out everywhere, barely satiated by governments promising their own people a swift and demanding reparation. The CFF was lambasted about hiding the Lich King for their hypocrisy when it comes to being the, quote, anti-slavery, unquote, alliance, and posing as the freedom faction, yet allowing undead murderous Lich King hiding amongst them. Axelphage proposed to pay considerable amounts to all of the kingdoms that would be hurt if this were to happen. To make matters worse, the CFF decided to sort of side with Denartha. They agreed that the decision to revive Loom was bad, but equally as bad as slavery, and offered the UAS to abolish slavery in return for Loom's death. That was the proposal. Abolishment of slavery from the UAS and the CFF would kill Loom. This was the proposal was named the Treaty of Two Evils. The UAS laughed at the proposal and claimed they are supporting genocide when referring to looms instead of slavery. And it was a clear kingdom issue, slavery was. Hurth and Hajim got very heated, and their close proximity to each other feared everyone that lived there that war would soon break out. Hurth went as far to his captured Sahid and used it as a bargaining tool. When Hajim refused, Sahid was sent away on a boat, but this would not be the last time we would see him. After the UAS refused the Treaty of Two Evils, the CFF took it upon themselves to demand that Dunartha killed Loom. Dunartha refused, despite civil wars from their own people who wanted to go back to serving their god of the seas, the Admiral Subselvin. The CFF kicked out Dunartha from their organization. By the year 515, virtually all kingdoms had denounced Dunartha and begun waging war against them. These wars took place over the next 60 years as kingdoms worked effortlessly to push back against the raging war machine that was Dunartha. The following are all accounts of how each kingdom aided in the war effort against Dunartha. Vorlong had finished their military and naval fleet to track across the ocean and assault the volcano. It was the largest single military ever assembled, over 100,000 men and several phoenixes. They took along their flame of creation as it was in its final days of burning out, and they worried that their people's lifespans, getting shorter and shorter, would eventually die. Lalatula sent settlers near the volcano to establish a magical base and hoped to be the magical front of the war for the CFF. They were immediately slaughtered by Dunartha. The backlash from their own people led to Lalatula to remain out of the war directly and offer information in the form of secrets and spies to Vorlong. Hurth attempted to stay as apolitical as possible during the war, considering their close proximity to the volcano, and began focusing on keeping their people happy rather than fixing the wider world. However, Hurth did do one thing that massively impacted the war effort. In 518, they established the first ever currency known as chirps. Large amounts of chirps were known as nicks, which was what the kingdoms traded in. This made helping and aiding war much easier, considering kingdoms could now officially be paid for their efforts rather than returned in kind at later point. Gone was the IOU system. It was immediate payment. Amenhotep, for the first real time in 500 years, exited their jungle and met with the Gold Scale dynasty, who hatched the plan to use dark magic in order to mind control Dunart civilians into revolting and denouncing Dunartha at the volcano itself. This was done, and Dunartha did not hesitate to murder their own people who had just gotten mind transformed and opposed their throne of Loom. They saw this action from Amenhotep and the Gold Scale as a great sin. Amenhotep then created their own incredibly powerful military units called Knights of Cain, who followed the god of victory and war, the Titan King Cain. Axophage helped the war effort by supplying each kingdom the resources it needed, propping up the war and becoming very rich in this new currency that had just been established. Hajim has been establishing their military and began marching it north, making good on their promise to Dunartha to one day take back the volcano. Their military was led by their dragon, Alib al-Mat, and the Halaju's youngest ever Kulim, who was just a kid. For decades, small battles would break out, mainly between Halaju backed by the kingdoms and Dunartha backed by Loom, and his ability to create a military force of Forgeborn from the fires of Antus was enough to compete with all the other kingdoms combined to destroy them. Despite how powerful Loom was, Dunartha slowly lost their grip on their land over the decades. Many military experts were surprised how long one kingdom in Dunartha was able to stave off the rest of the realms. However, this entire time, Dunartha had been fortifying the volcano to be impenetrable. They eventually called back their army and prepared for the final battle. Either they would strike a mortal blow to the kingdoms, proving to all that their combined efforts were not enough, revealing their task futile, or the volcano would be liberated and Loom would be killed. In the year 581 ATR, Hajim and Amenhotep assaulted the volcano in the Second Battle of Antus, and where Hajim failed nearly 300 years ago, they finally succeeded, and Dinartha and all of their military forces were killed. The dragon Alib-al-Mat went into the volcano, found and ate the nursing heart of Loom, killing the god of the all-hell. The kid Kulim, who rode the dragon into battle, got imbued with the dragon's magical powers and became immortal. He was known as Kid Kulim and was seen as the face of the liberation of Antus. However, military scholars would note it was the Knights of Cain who played the largest role in the victory. Six weeks later, the entire army of Vorlong arrived, ready to battle. Hajim informed them that Loom had already been defeated, and to prove that Hajim believed the volcano should be a monument to hope instead of fear, they gave the entire volcano over to Vorlong in hopes the volcano would accept their flame of creation. Vorlong cast their flame of creation into Antus, and in an instant, every single member of the Fanu Vela turned into ash, and the kingdom of Vorlong was dead in an instant. The volcano remained uncolonized once more. Instead of continuing to destroy Dinartha by assaulting their nearby capital of Slanti, Hajim offered terms of treaty. The Treaty of Bui and Ka was signed, which limited Dinartha's ability to make a military and taxed their people, paying large sums of nix to Hajim for the next 250 years. Dinartha agreed as they began to turn back to their old ways of serving the admiral, Subselvan, the god of seas. The volcano was co-colonized by three kingdoms, Hajim, Hurth, and the Goldscale dynasty, to ensure that no kingdom could gain control without going through two other kingdoms first. This was called the Trinity-bound Fortress. In 580, the Lich King took 5,000 civilians from Hurth and Lalatula and killed all of them. Axelphage paid them reparations as promised. The Lich King revealed to Axelphage only that he wasn't from a far-off land. He had figured out how to travel from right lands into Pardis, the land of the gods, back to Pardis, and he comes from the Bastard lands, which were the lands of Ilkin the Bastard. He then gifts Axelphage a portal to be able to travel wherever they wish. He then leaves. Hundreds of years later, he would show back up and give a portal to every other kingdom in the realm. In 584, the Goldscale dynasty proposed that the kingdoms learned from that they should learn from the mistakes of the last hundreds of years, and that everyone should come together to create all kingdom laws. It was drafted and signed a year later and named the Quorum de Totem. The slave kingdoms signed with a contingent agreement that slavery cannot at any point be brought up against them as it came to kingdom laws, and that it must remain a kingdom-specific issue, not an all-realms issue. After Dinartha had been defeated, the sting of how the CFF handled the situation was still at large. Amenhotep and Axelphage broke out into a short 4-year war in 597 ATR. Axelphage won the war by violating an agreed upon battle terms, leading most to believe that agreed upon battle location and number of troops. Axelphage violated this by bringing many more troops than were agreed upon. However, Amenhotep claimed that this violation of the QDT. Yet, the claims were not investigated, leading to most believe that the QDT was not going to be a governed body based on the majority bias rather than justices seeking their own justice. Amenhotep began marching military fleets to Axelphage's capital. Once they heard about this, the two kingdoms came together and made a deal to stop the war. In 631, so here will be an image of Talus's picture with a bunch of Talosian stuff. A small state of bird race people known as Talos, who openly traded in rumors and secrets, emerged as a massive powerhouse of information. They were officially recognized as a kingdom and signed the QDT. They gained secrets and used them as currency to hold with the larger kingdoms. For the next 50 years or so, kingdoms go back and forth on trading, as well as bettering their own kingdoms. We'll take a look at each kingdom. Goldscale Dynasty continued their expansion and their colonizational reach, purchasing lands from pretty much every other kingdom. Lalatoula discovered every spell and trains master wizards in each school, as well as created a secret hidden city from the rest of the kingdoms named Penumbra. Hearth expands their people's heritage and paves the way for a peaceful democratic society. Axophage becomes the main hub which all kingdoms get their supplies, making them incredibly rich in the process. Talos starts to spread their secrets and their secret outposts all across the realm and learn dirt on every kingdom to gain leverage, devoting themselves to the collective of trickery and thieves, which is a god. Hajim turns their focus on strengthening ties with Amenhotep and continuing to fortify their military with respected generals and grow their capital city of Azim. Slavery continued in Hajim. Amenhotep begins to convert other kingdoms' cities to their core religion of Zes and focus on a steady military growth with avid religiosity. Slavery also continued under Amenhotep. Dunartha licked their wounds from the Lost War and focused on being a naval kingdom once more, and refocuses their religion back to Sub-Self and the Admiral of the Seas. They also trained and raised elven hippos named Dobas, which become an important part in Dunart trade and Dunart military. The barbarians who have created their own settlement, calling themselves the Scourge, begin to ramp up their aggression against the kingdoms, mainly Axophage. In the year 691, a creature known as the Beast of the Living Land is near extinct, where only one male is left and one female. However, they are on opposite sides of Pardis. The male, Oumuamua, must swim across Pardis in order to mate and keep their species alive. This beast purifies waters of the world, keeping them clean. They are also known to have the world's best loot in their shell, which is why Poachers Guild targeted them so heavily, leading to their endangerment. However, the beast is so large that it swims through land and continues to do so, killing whatever it's in its path along the way. The kingdoms are split on whether to kill the beast or let it make its journey peacefully, despite the risk that it may run through a major city, killing thousands. The kingdoms agree to let the beast make its journey peacefully. The beast's trajectory is heading for the Scourge capital of Winterglaive, and the barbarians attack the Beast of the Living Land. Several kingdoms had a military traveling with the beast in case an attack like this did happen. Hajim had the largest military presence and began attacking the Scourge. The Scourge, however, had no interest to attack other kingdoms. Instead, they wanted Oumuamua dead to stop its travel and gain its loot. Hajim, instead of attacking the Scourge, turned their attack to Oumuamua, and Hajim ended up killing the beast and taking its bounty. After the beast was killed, the Scourge fled since the goal was accomplished, though not by them. Hajim's dragon Alib Almat and Kid Kulim played another large part in this victory. Many of the kingdoms came down against Hajim for this action, stating they violated what the agreement was. Dunartha, who loved the oceans, particularly took offense to this and began growing their military in secret under Hajim's noses. This also furthered the disdain between Hajim and Dunartha. Hajim spread out the loot from the Oumuamua bounty, and Hajim was put in trial for these actions, yet they barely escaped with no charges. The ocean slowly began to pollute without the Beast of the Living Land to save the waters, but Dunartha begins to investigate a way to clean the waters magically. In the year 711, the black market is established by a secret organization named Hush, which was a term used for the note-revealing loom 200 years earlier, presuming that whoever started this organization leaked the information. Nobody knows who's behind this organization. For the next 50 years, the Scourge barbarians begin even more of a problem against the kingdoms, ramping up their attacks. In 752, Lalatoula secretly steals a dragon egg from the Goldscale dynasty and hides it in their secret city of Penumbra. The Goldscale dynasty commissions Talos to find the location of the egg. Talos does just that and finds out it's in Lalatulla, but does not know exactly where it is placed. Talos then tells the Goldscale Dynasty they do not know where it was exactly. Not trusting Talos' research, GSD asked Hush to investigate. Hush responded by saying that they knew that Talos was lying, which was technically true because they couldn't find the elusive city of Penumbra. This is kind of a whirling, convoluted conflict here, but the most important thing you really need to know is that Lalatulla stole an egg from Goldscale Dynasty, and Talos did not inform Goldscale where it was. This created a cold war between the Goldscale Dynasty and Talos. Talos refused to tell GSD that Lalatulla had it because their deal, and they didn't know the exact location, quote unquote, as it was hidden in Penumbra. This was titled the Bladeless War. GSD threatened to destroy Talos' nearby cities with dragonfire, creating a years-long doomsday panic in Talos. GSD proposed a break of the QDT, but it was shot down. When judicial resolutions failed, GSD officially declared war on Talos. Hajim, however, steps in to defend Talos, stating that GSD is not allowed to bully the smaller kingdoms, and a war on Talos would be a war on Hajim. Hajim sent Alib al-Mat and Kid Kulim to defend the Talosian city of the Burrows from invasion. GSD considered their options. Amidst the chaos, Talos then pleaded to Lalatulla to do something, considering they kept their secrets. Lalatulla commissioned Hush to sell the egg back to GSD anonymously, which they did. GSD took back their declaration of war, but promised swift action if GSD finds out that Talos held the egg. The Bladeless War lasted nearly a decade as the mystery unfolded, but in the end, no one died, and the Goldscale Dynasty never found out who took their egg. Over the next 50 years, the Scourge once again became a problem, assaulting a world fair held by Hearth. This was called the World Fair Massacre. In 814, the Scourge mounted their first large-scale campaign against Axelphage. 3 years of battling later, the Scourge took over the city and burned the capital. This was known as the Fall of Viril. Axelphage begged their southern allies, the Goldscale Dynasty, for help. GSD sent several dragons to liberate Viril and fight back against the Scourge. The Dinians succeeded in taking back the city, yet the first ever dragon named Liberator Vatsan was killed during the battle. The city was handed back to Axelphage, who renamed the capital city Vatsan in honor of the fallen dragon. The head of the dragon was stolen by the Scourgians, who fled. They brought back the head to their lead chieftain, who was named Bastard Radix, who was said to have kissed the dragon's head. And 25 years later, Bastard Radix rallied a military force of over 250,000 soldiers and marched south to wage war on the closest kingdom to them, Amenhotep. Hajim, Goldscale Dynasty, and Amenhotep came together in order to help fight back against the Scourge. The casualties from this war were astronomical. Several key battles and strategies were deployed, as this is the first war to heavily rely on strategic prowess rather than sheer power. The war mainly took place in the thick of the Salatine jungle, which was nearly impossible to maneuver. Here are some of the key battles. The Blitz of the Sancrosact Arboretum, which was won by the Scourge. The Ambush of Blood Marsh, which was a successful kingdom ambush that severely hurt the barbarians. This battle was the biggest splash that put Amenhotep on the map to be considered a powerhouse military kingdom now, alongside Hajim and Danartha, after the performance of their Knights of Cain once again shined. The Clear Sky Skirmish, which saw several kingdoms' dragons killed in battle, and the kingdoms fled. The Bastard Radix, however, he survived and led the charge to the final war. He was named the Draconic Reaper, and his flesh was burned away by one of the dragons, but yet he survived. The next and final battle was the defense of Dragon Tree Temple, which had the greatest military mind in the world, the Knight of Cain General Talado. using his patented pyramid temple defense to defend the Dragon Tree Temple, which was devoted to the dragon god Setsi. The kingdom successfully defended and begun the dominoes that would lead to the Scourgians' demise. The battle ended in an intense fight between Bastard Radix Draconic Reaper against Alib Almat and Kid Kulim. Bastard Radix killed Alib Almat, and Kid Kulim killed the Bastard Radix. However, with the dragon who was giving him his mortal energy dead, Kid Kulim died shortly after. The barbarian military had been defeated, but not without massive casualties on the side of Goldscale Dynasty, Hajim, and Amenhotep, totaling over 70,000 men and 9 dragons, leaving only a handful left in the world. Once again, the Amenhotep Knights of Cain proved the greatest warriors in the entire world during these wars. The wars against the barbarians were known as the 1,000-Year War. But it wasn't over quite yet. In an attempt to snuff out the barbarians for good, Amenhotep and Hajim went on killing raids of Scourgian cities, committing horrible acts to the women and children there. Hearth and Goldscale Dynasty would claim that these two kingdoms were out of control and required them to stop. Hajim and Amenhotep claimed it was justice for what the barbarians had started. However, the last barbarians remained elusive. Amenhotep took all of their previously owned land, and the barbarian capital was taken by Amenhotep, and a world prison was placed on it called Slave Island. This was the location also of the source of the Scourgians' teleporting magic talked about prior, the Jaunting, which was now under control of Amenhotep. Finally, in 866, the Bastard Blight began. Lalatoula put the final nail in the barbarian coffin by casting something they had discovered long ago during their magical experiments. This was called Starfall. It decimated an entire megacity of people overnight. Rain of molten fire came down onto them. It was called the Moon of Molten Skies, and it killed 150,000 women and children barbarians. The scourge had gone extinct. The world reacted grimly to this new realization that spells can commit mass genocide overnight. Curiously, Bohr, a red planet that circles in and out of orbit every 150 years, orbits into sky after the casting of Starfall and does not leave its orbit. The Goldscale Dynasty continued to progress in colonizing and has now more population than any other kingdom combined. They perfectly created their government to be able to quell rebellion and quell civil problems. Donartha creates a magical teleporting bridge and improves their magical abilities in the light of the newfound magical applications to war. Their people still want revenge from Hajim as their treaty comes to an end, and continuing to purify the waters of Amuamuau's death. Hajim and Amenhotep continue to strengthen their bond and their military as the kingdoms get isolated for their slavery views. No other kingdom could contest them if they wished to take over, and other kingdoms knew that. Axophage gets more and more rich, affecting the world market at the will of their trade, spreading banks and betting halls all around. They begin to throw away their value for workmanship in return for profit. Lalatoula begins investing more time into defense magic after details of the Molten Sky Massacre come to light. Hearth tries to brighten their world up and create a giant wall around their city stretching thousands of miles named the Wall of Vitrask. This was likely also due to the realization of war and magic. Talos sent out more outposts to gain knowledge everywhere, gaining more and more power over the black market. In the year 901, a group named the August Brooch Society asked the kingdoms to send them Nyx in order for them to invest in a return for their profit. It has much monetary upside, but it comes with the risk of economic downfall if mismanaged. The kingdoms agree to this and pay the ABS, hoping it will turn out good and not crash the world economy. In the year 903, Dinartha commissions Talos to steal an egg from Hajim for them. It was successful, and Dinartha hid the egg successfully. The egg hatched, and Dinartha nursed one of its eggs into a mother dragon for 8 years as Hajim pulls out all the stops to try to find who did this. However, they were unsuccessful. Dinartha placed the new egg on the black market anonymously, and Hajim purchases it, which ends the conflict. In 941, Sahid appears and returns to Hajim, planning to convince the government to abolish slavery. Non-slave kingdoms try to convince the slave kingdoms, convict the slave kingdoms of crimes against humanity. The slave kingdoms of Amenhotep and Hajim take offense, claiming the QDT was signed with this specific caveat. They lose trading opportunities and tensions continue to grow. In 959, a cult named the Brotherhood of the Burnt Moon believed that Lum was a god that manifested over and over across all time and space and is used to reset the world when mortals become too strong. They claim to have traveled to the All-Hell, using the same portaling technology that Daku the Lich King had to get here. They claim to have stolen Lum's egg and plan to sell it on the black market to the highest bidder, which would in turn revive Lum once more. They offered a family from each kingdom to meet them as they planned to travel into the stars on a blimp they made. They believed that the planet of Bor that still remained up in the sky was a message from Lum. And they believed they wanted to go up there and give an opportunity to all of the kingdoms to join them. Lum's egg promises to revive the once dead god, giving absolute power to the purchasing kingdom, not needing the owner of the volcano anymore. The CFF, led by the Gold Scale Dynasty, who amassed a lot of currency for their colonizing and agricultural trade, began to plan on purchasing the egg and killing it, destroying it for good. Hajim and Amenhotep meet to discuss this possibility of purchasing the egg and bringing Lum back to life, something they were once against. However, centuries of being looked down upon for slavery have paid a toll on their tolerance. They both agree they should purchase the egg and bring Lum back to life. In 971 ATR, the egg goes live on the black market. All bids were anonymous. Lalatula secretly started the bidding, followed by the Gold Scale Dynasty. Amenhotep and Hajim then placed their bid, and after some back and forth, the final bid was won by the Gold Scale Dynasty, who tricked the Brotherhood of the Burnt Moon into thinking they wanted to revive Lum. Instead, the Gold Scale killed it, destroying Lum's chances of ever returning to Pardis and saving the lives of every Pardisian. In 975, Amenhotep tells Hajim that with their combined militaries, they would be able to take over the world without Lum and get payment for the poor treatment they have received due to slavery. Hajim agreed, and the two begin to grow their military for the direct reason of taking over Pardis. The Amens, who were very omni-religious, trade in their omni-religion for monotheism and devote their kingdom to King Cain in order to help with the upcoming wars of taking over the world. In 1009 ATR, Axophage begins to officially manipulate the market to make more money and make the market worse, so kingdoms will be more dependent on them for trade. They are put on trial for this by Hearth, and the kingdoms vote that it was a break of the QDT, and Axophage is forced to disperse their nicks and leave the market alone. Many kingdoms stop trading with Axophage for this very reason. In 1052, Lalatula created a new school of magic called Right Land magic, and deals with harnessing the power of the gods for magical purposes. In 1060, Hearth finished the construction of their Wall of Retrask and continued to hold world fairs, bringing happiness and wonder to all of the world. In 1069, Sahid completes a coup in Hajim and immediately abolishes slavery. Sahid also informs the Gold Scale Dynasty about Amenhotep's intentions to take over the world, and that Amenhotep alone intended to purchase and revive Lum, even though that was technically untrue. An anonymous source leaks the information that Hajim turned on Amenhotep. After investigating for themselves, Amenhotep finds it to be true and confronts Hajim.
Hajim apologizes and claimed they wish no ill will. Amenhotep immediately begins to plot on how to overthrow Hajim and subjugate them. In 1070, the investment company of the August Brooch Society caused a massive market crash. Kingdoms lose a large amount of their wealth. In 1080, Amenhotep holds council with Hajim and begins to hatch their plans to overthrow Hajim. They convince Hajim that Dinartha needs to be eliminated for what they did at Antus all those years ago, and believes that Dinartha placed the first bid on Loom's egg. Hajim agrees because they still hate Dinartha, and both of them begin to grow their military. After being convinced by Amenhotep, Hajim declares war on Dinartha to right the wrong of the two kingdoms' ancient feud. In 1082, Dinartha pleads to the rest of the kingdoms, asking for aid against Hajim's tyranny. In 1084, the current king cleric, or Kamun in Amenhotep, holds a secret meeting with Dinartha and asks if they want Hajim destroyed. They should team up to trick Hajim. In 1090, Amenhotep sent 30,000 Knights of Cain into Hajim's capital, who were there to protect Hajim's homeland, quote-unquote. Considering that Hajim was sending their military north toward Dinartha, they would leave their capital open. For this reason, Hajim obliged. However, Hajim feared an attack from Dinartha and asked Hurth to finally agree on joining sides. Citing that slavery was abolished, they asked for help by their most vulnerable yet culturally important city, Madialahi. Hurth agreed, and military units began en route. That same year, the entire Halaju military sent north to the world prison, where the haunting mines were. This was done so that the two armies could jaunt their entire army into Dinartha's city of Choilin. They jaunted, however, with Amenhotep in control of the jaunting and location, they jaunted directly into a trap, where both Dinartha and Amenhotep teamed up against Hajim. This is very culturally significant because Amenhotep and Hajim had been great allies this entire time, yet Hajim's abolishment of slavery and heel turn on the issue made Dinartha distrust them and want to take them out. This kicked off the first ever Betrayer Wars. Hajim's military lost the war significantly because the ambush. During this battle, they had secretly revived a Dinart spellcaster and extracted the information of how to cast Starfall. They being Amenhotep. Amenhotep extracted the ability to cast Starfall from Dinartha. Okay. That same day, the 30,000 Amenhotep soldiers in Hajim turned and seized the capital of Hajim, attempting to kill as few people as possible. The freedom fighter of Sahid was decapitated, and the feared Amen Knight of Cain General Taurus sat on the Halkar throne. The next day, Dinartha cast Starfall on the island city of Madialahi, the home of Setzizing's shrine, sinking the entire shrine and the dragon's shrine, and the entire island, killing every single Halaju there. The Hurthian military had thankfully yet to arrive, but saw the event play out from the waters. So there was a lot that just happened there. But the most important thing that you need to know is that Dinartha and Amenhotep teamed up to betray Hajim, which is especially heartbreaking because Hajim and Amenhotep had been best friends for so long. Amenhotep leaders and Halaju leaders met, and they came to terms of subjugation. Hajim immediately renounced its position as an official kingdom and would now be known as the House of Hajim of Amenhotep, and they would also reinstill slavery immediately. Hajim agreed that they should not have betrayed Amenhotep, but in order to sign their subjugation agreement, they required one thing in return from Amenhotep. That one thing was that Dinartha would be destroyed. Amenhotep agreed, and the Treaty of Broken Hearts was signed, and less than half a year after it started, the First Betrayer War came to an end. Extensive trials, named the Einthar trials, would be conducted to determine which of the diplomats and military generals supported by Sahid's rule they would be found out, and they would be turned into the suicide military units of the Einthar. Officially, Azim would rename Halkar which was the Halaju word for chain. This was a reminder from Amenhotep of Halaju's betrayal. In 1125, the Augsburg Society once again crashed the market, destabilizing the currency. Axelphage once more used this to get even more rich. Amenhotep's lust for victory is fueled by their devotion to the god King Cain, and led them to set their sights on Axelphage because of the mass amounts of wealth the kingdom had. In their mind, if Amenhotep took over Axelphage first, they could get all of their money and use that to war everyone else. So in 1131, Amenhotep officially declared war on Axelphage. Amenhotep sent terms of subjugation immediately to Axelphage at the beginning of the war, claiming they would be allowed to remain unenslaved as long as they subjugate and hand over all their currency, allowing an out. Axelphage refused, instead built up their military and commissioned the Goldscale dynasty to help fortify Avid, which was their city that Amenhotep was marching towards, and the War of Nyx began. The Amenhotep war machine was now in full motion, powered by Hajim's help. In 1137, Amenhotep surprised Dinartha, attacking their westmost city of Ur-Dethar, kicking off the Second Betrayal War. This is important because Amenhotep and Dinartha, though they were just allied before, Amenhotep only did that so that they could win the battle. They didn't really actually care about Dinartha as a whole. So when the terms of subjugation came up from Hajim, they quickly took on it, and now they're cashing in on that promise. The same year, Amenhotep sent 10,000 men to attack the nearby Talosian city of Featherstrand. Talos heard about Amenhotep's conquering and expedited the process of making Featherstrand operational. It wasn't until they heard that 10,000 Amens were marching on Featherstrand where they had the city take flight into the skies, which was a project they had been working on for a very long time. The city itself unearthed and flew away. Yeah. Okay. The war between Axelphage and Amenhotep continued as Amenhotep slowly pushed their forces over the expanse into Obythius and marched west towards Avid. Essentially, for those of you that don't know what these cities mean, it just means that Amenhotep is taking their battle across the ocean, stretching themselves out even further. I've been talking a lot. Let me get a drink. Hurth begins to see the trend of conquering, noting that Amenhotep will never stop. They send military to aid Dinartha. Lalatula sees all the war and continues to retreat and move people from their tundra to the secret city of Penumbra. However, they wish to be on the right side of history, so they send 1,000 golems to aid Dinartha in the counterattack. Golems were the magically created military of Lalatula. In 1149, Dinartha attacks the Amenhotep city of Agogia, using their teleporting bridges to mobilize their military quickly. With the aid of Lalatulian golems, the attack is successful, and Agogia is taken. The lands around Agogia will act as the southern battleground for the war. In 1152, Lalatula cast a spell, killing 2,000 Amen troops. The same year, Talos begins spying on Amenhotep's army and informs both Dinartha and Hurth for the Second Betrayal War, and to Axelphage and Goldscale for the War of Nyx. Talos makes a large profit doing this. However, after being caught by Amenhotep, they successfully blame it on Lalatula. This made Amenhotep begin to look towards Lalatula as a threat, essentially, Talos just pulled off a very smart information heist and blamed it all on Lalatula, which Amenhotep absolutely believed. At this time, it's important to note that Amenhotep is fighting 2 wars on 3 fronts. They have a battle overseas in Obythius against Axelphage and the Goldscale dynasty for 1, a northern battle in Strikend against Dinartha and Hurth for 2, and finally a defensive front in their homeland down south. Placing the horrible ideology of the worldwide slavery aside, Amenhotep's military was so great that it had the ability to essentially fight 3 wars and fight them successfully. In 1154, Amenhotep launched a military offensive towards Dinartha's capital city of Slanti. This battle was a major turning point. The battle took place at the shrine for Subselven and was dubbed Subselven's Stand. Dunartha and Hurth dealt a major blow to the Amenhotep forces. However, Amenhotep's military was still so large that they amassed a giant naval fleet who attacked the Dunart city of Choilin. Over 4 years later, in 1158, however, Dunartha's fleet was much more proficient, and Dunartha had shown the benefits of being a naval culture as they dominated the battlefield on the water, which is now known as the Battle of Long Farage, or Farig, sinking Amenhotep's massive fleet and killing the feared military general of Taurus, Knight of General Taurus, who was the knight that had taken Halkar all those years ago. Again, in 1180, Dunartha took back Ur-Dathar, freeing their people. Amenhotep fled and put up no fight, pushing back to their fortress of Antus. Now, it's as a little reminder, Amenhotep had taken over all of Hajim's land during the subjugation, and part of that land was at the Trinity-bound fortress. So technically, Amenhotep had a sliver of the volcano, 1/3 of it, of which they had. Although they couldn't revive Loom in any way, this was a kind of an axle towards the north that they could have. Now, if you've been counting, that is 3 major losses in a row for Amenhotep during the Second Betrayer War. Over the next 12 years, the war for Nyx began to turn in Amenhotep's favor. In 1184, Amenhotep wizards successfully cast Starfall on all 3 city capitals of Axelphage, decimating them and their people overnight, including the entire Axelphage army and all of the Goldscale Dynasty reinforcements. With one casting of one spell, did all of this. The Goldscale Dynasty reached out to Axelphage and reached out in terms of subjugation, saying, hey, subjugate to us, you will be free from Amenhotep's tyranny. Amenhotep then rolled into Avid with their military and parked their entire military right next to Axelphage's remaining cities. And Amenhotep began negotiations with Axelphage. As the longer the negotiations drew, the more anarchy started to build in Axelphage. Axelphage essentially had 2 options now that they had pretty much been defeated. One, they could side with the Goldscale Dynasty and subjugate them to continue to fight this war. I've got behind. Hopefully I wasn't behind for very long. This is the Starfall, and then this is the 2 options that Axelphage had. One, they could side with the Goldscale Dynasty, subjugate to them, and continue to fight this war with their help while the enemy is literally at their doorstep. Or 2, they could subjugate to Amenhotep, keeping control of their money, and have the wealthy elite essentially be turned into a bank, but have the rest of their population turn into slaves. However, this would end the war and end a certain amount of suffering. Axelphage chose the latter and subjugated to Amenhotep in 1189. Amenhotep took control of all of Axelphage's land and military and essentially assumed their currency. Axelphage was renounced as a kingdom and is now known as the House of Axelphage of Amenhotep. However, the government of Axelphage was turned into a bank for Amenhotep, which controls roughly half of Pardis's current wealth. The war for Nyx had come to an end, and Amenhotep had won. Lalatua finishes their immigration to their secret city of Penumbra. However, a small portion of their population still stays behind in order to control their old capital and the Mystic Islands and all their schools. But most of the people have successfully fled to Penumbra, which is still hidden from the rest of the world. Talos flies Featherstrand far, far from Amenhotep's control. And in 1199, Amenhotep attempts to take back Agosia in the south and is partially successful with the help of the god Ego Zephyr and his clerics. They were working on their shrine to reverse time in order for their dragon, who was named Pharanox, to see the possible outcomes of the battle. This time manipulation spellcasting was successful and is known as the Holy Retry. Instead of killing the Dinarth dragon that was on the battlefield, they captured it. including Denartha. This was a dragon named Haas, which was Denartha's pride and joy when it came to dragons, which again had sprouted off long ago from stealing the egg from Hajim. Denartha mostly retreated across the barren ice strait, which is this long, straight land of glaciers. That dragon I just mentioned, Ferronox, decided to chase them down. However, it freezed in the extreme cold and was never seen or found again. Most of the Amens back in the home country believed that this was a sign that they were not going to win the war. However, in 1203, Denartha and Hurth assaulted the Fortress of Wisdom, which was at the Trinity-bound fortress at the volcano of Ontus, in an attempt to rid Amenhotep from the north, which would be a crushing blow. However, to an attempt to do so, they depleted much of their military forces. Amenhotep unleashed the power of the volcano over a super wall called the Bulwark. The Goldscale dynasty also sent in a secret coup unit to destabilize the Amenhotep military from the inside. All of that being said, Amenhotep held strong at the Bulwark and successfully defended their portion of the volcano, pushing back the Denartha military and dealing a large blow. Both militaries were very wounded, and their resources were all but tapped. In 1209, both kingdoms met and came to a ceasefire that was renewed annually until it officially until in 1214 officially a peace treaty was reached between Denartha and Amenhotep. Denartha had proven that Amenhotep was incapable of conquering them, and Amenhotep proved that Denartha would not be allowed to take back Ontus. So both kingdoms agreed to a treaty. Amenhotep would retreat their military from the north in Striken back down to the south of Sata Sahutu. However, Amenhotep would keep control of their fortress on Ontus, and Denartha would hand over their little land they had in the south near Agosia, and retreat their remaining military out over the barren ice strait into Kabarafu. Amenhotep, as a last show of good faith, would return Denartha's stolen dragon of Haas, and would not. And there would be a non-attack clause for 150 years, ending the Second Betrayer War. Each kingdom then found a pocket of peace. The Goldscale dynasty continued to colonize and expand. Their total population equals over 14 million now, with their magnum opus, the Line of Vion, which was a city, had finally been complete. Hurth, in the end, stayed committed to exploration and the liberal arts, and created a happy, joyful culture in the kingdom, well protected by a military that has grown over the years. Lalatula has retreated most of their people to their secret city of Penumbra. Those who stay in their two remaining cities commit themselves to returning the reverence and beauty back into magic. Talos continues to sell information and stick their beaks where they don't belong. However, as long as they have Featherstrand, they'll consider themselves safe. Hajim has its culture very much intact. However, they operate under the kingdom banner of Amenhotep. The two kingdoms, who were once such good friends, are now legally inseparable. Axophage's population had been folded into slave trade for Amenhotep, while their wealthy elites operated the banks for Amenhotep, controlling supply and demand needs, which fuel the world's economy. Some believe that there is still a small group of Axophage priests who value the kingdom's early sentiments of hard work and old school production. Amenhotep's conquering has come to an end, for now, and they have reduced the kingdom count by 2, from 8 down to 6, and proven that themselves were the military powerhouse of Pardis. Their culture had begun to show signs of shifting back towards an omnitheistic tendency rather than a purely devoted to King Cain, the god of war. For good or bad, they have made their mark on Pardis' history. But perhaps no bigger influence was placed on Pardis by Denartha, who has completely transitioned away from wishing death to all Pardisians by the way of loom, and now see themselves as a strong seafaring culture who was the only kingdom who successfully pushed back against the tyranny of Amenhotep. Perhaps one day they will be able to snuff it out for good. To this day, they continue to purify the waters after the death of Oumuamua. That is my long explanation of the world lore of Pardis, A Kingdom's Reign game. I thank you for listening if you for some crazy reason made it this far. And I guess I'd like to say that another video about the current state of the world will be coming out. But if you've watched this, you probably understand the current state of the world. You probably understand it better than I do. So I will also be doing a very short video which will summarize the last, how long have I been going? Will summarize the last hour and 9 minutes in about 5-minute chunk. But as you can imagine, I'm going to have to be cutting out a significant amount of that. Thank you very much.